me welcome you, one and all, to tonight's gathering of the Film Board from the next reel on rashpixel.fm. We spoil movies, and on this show, we're going to break through the linchpin of the penultimate film of the Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 3. This week introduces us to the Marvel superhero we've all been waiting for, Captain Marvel.
So, Skrulls are the bad guys. And you're a Kree, a race of noble warriors.
Heroes. Noble warrior heroes.
First things first, for our hosts, tell me some completely obscure thing about your distant past that no Skrull alien imitator person would be able to simulate. First up, prove to us who you are, Andy Nelson.
When I was a young boy, the instrument that I played was the lap dulcimer.
What? There's no way that a Skrull would know what a lap dulcimer is. Because no one knows what a lap dulcimer is.
Very few people probably do.
That's good. All right. Steve Sarmento, what do you got? Who are you?
If you were able to track down some of my close friends from junior high, they could verify that due to some actions that I took in the cafeteria, school policies had to be changed.
That's an interesting yet vague fact.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I was really interrogating you to figure out if you were a Skrull imposter, I may press you on the details of that, but I assume that you're withholding that for a reason. So I will leave that alone for now. These guys call me JJ, and I used to spend an inordinate amount of time standing at the bottom of a disgusting pond behind my house just to feel the muck between my toes, and there is nothing that was healthy about that. But whatever. What did you guys think of this movie? Let's start with initial thoughts from Steve. Captain Marvel.
I just saw it this morning. I'm still brewing through, but I have to say, this movie made my heart happy. There's something about this character and the journey we go on with Carol and her sort of self-discovery, her accomplishments, her ability to learn her identity and stand her ground herself. I think because I've got daughters and I look at her as this role model for them. And we'll probably get into, more details, but when she says, "I have nothing to prove to you," I just was like, yes, I'm right there with her.
That was a pretty sweet line. I agree with that. What did you think, Andy?
I wanted it to make my heart happy. I think there are many, many good things about what they did here. I think the character is a really interesting one. I enjoy her journey. I enjoy all of the supporting characters. I enjoy what the story is saying. Unfortunately, I felt like the directors never had a good handle on the way to construct the story and pace it in a way where I was emotionally invested in the story. And I weirdly just constantly felt like there was a wall between me and the movie because I don't know, the directors, I felt like they didn't know how to handle a big budget movie like this and tell a story that needed more meat. I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff about this character that just never was depicted in a way that gave me what I needed to kind of get emotionally invested in the story. And so that was frustrating because I think that it's all there. I just don't think that they put it together in the right package.
Okay. And I think it's interesting. There's two directors on this movie too. And I'm not used to that. So maybe you can kind of, when we get into it and talk about the people a little bit, we can talk about how that may have come to be and how that would be executed exactly. Because I've even seen them do press together about being the directors of this film. And I found that really interesting. It's a new thing for me. I was ultimately very, very disappointed with this movie. I was on a little bit of a roller coaster coming up to it because I wanted it to be really great, and then I got really nervous that this was going to be so important that it wasn't going to be able to live up to my expectations. And then I started seeing great press about it, and people were talking about it, and everybody was excited for this movie. I saw the Air Force advertisement that was talking about the women pilots of the Air Force, and I felt like that Marvel was really doing an interesting connection here that was going to have it stand apart from something, like Wonder Woman that we saw in the DC universe. But ultimately, ultimately it felt really convoluted and fast and kind of felt like a shorthand comic book movie to me. And that was really, really difficult for me to handle. So I want to get into all that stuff. But first, I want to do like a really quick synopsis of this, because I think we're going to touch on little parts of this, and maybe some of the talking points will actually point at this. And the way that I was kind of surprised right away when we started seeing the titles that were from Guardians of the Galaxy, and the same kind of typeface in the stuff that we saw on the screen, that I really felt like this came at us like a Guardians of the Galaxy prequel. And it was focusing a lot on the political reasons why the Kree race, which we've seen before in Ronan the Accuser, and those folks, are that Kree race is bad in those movies, in the Guardians movies. And this kind of is meant as an origin story of why that is. And it plays a lot like the slow play reveal in Star Wars 1, 2, and 3, where our main character, and by proxy us, so Carol Danvers and us, are brainwashed into believing that the enforcement arm of the galaxy is the righteous one, right? That's kind of the Senate and the things from Star Wars. This is how I'm kind of parsing this out. You'll have to tell me if this is wrong, but it's righteous in that the rebellious terrorists are bad, is how we look at it at the beginning. But then we learn the lesson that war in itself is bad, and that this enforcement arm becomes the Empire in the Star Wars, and here the Kree is the real bad people. Verse, that's our main character, and later we learn her name is Carol Danvers, is in possession of what seems to be an ultimate power and is being held back in her execution of it. This movie is about Carol finding herself, her power, and using it to set the universe right. And that kind of sounds like a setup for the finale, right? Ultimate power? The Endgame,
Yes.
That's what's coming out next month, right?
Yes.
Do you guys agree with that? Do you think that that's where this movie sat? Am I missing the point? Steve, maybe you should address that. Did I get pulled in the wrong direction in the way that I was feeling that political statement there?
No, I think this is the challenge with Marvel movies in general, particularly now that we're this far along.
Yeah,
21.
what number is this?
The
Is this
MCU.
20?
This is
21.
21.
Wow, 21.
Because there are specific questions that must be answered and specific information that has to be introduced so that it's available in the MCU. And this was often one of my critiques of the first, two Thor movies, was these were like placeholders to get certain information into the MCU so that it was in play for later films. And I think that is a challenge with this one, because from the end of Infinity War, where, Nick Fury, we've got the pager, so we've got that set up. We then have to identify who this Captain Marvel character is and get information so that we have everything we need for Endgame. So you've got to sandwich all that in. How do things connect into the larger MCU? I know when I got home, I looked, and there are all of these articles about, hey, here's the timeline of the Tesseract, because that shows up in this movie. And people are like, well, wait, where are we in the timeline? Where is the Tesseract? Does it make sense that this is where it is? How did it get here? Because we've seen it in, the Captain America, the first Avenger, and then it appeared in the Avengers movie. So tracking timeline, and that's the challenge with this. And then you also have to combine an origin story of who is this character. We need to identify who this person is, sort of what their affinities are, which side they're on, what their personality is like. Captain Marvel is this relatively unknown character. What's her personality like? Is she more like Tony Stark? Is she more like Steve Rogers? Who is she? So we've got all that work to do. So I can see why, with all that lifting going on, what is this movie really about? What is it trying to say? Plus, we've got the Kree to get all of that in there, and twists and flips and who's true and who's not, plus the shape-shifting. Can you believe anyone is who they say they really are? That can make this movie, I think, appear to be a bit of a mess. For me, I know that I've got to sort of set that in my mind. I set this aside of, this is a traditional plot of good versus bad with an arc that's we're going to defeat the bad guy at the end, and that's going to resolve everything, because this story isn't about itself. It's about a chapter in a much larger story. So I really honed in on what I think is the strength of this is Carol's journey of self-discovery.
Well,
and that's for me the strength.
So that's interesting, though, because then I kind of bump into some of the pace problems that Andy was talking about. Because in the first act of the film, we're really kind of pressed with this thing of she's trying to figure out who she is because she's had a memory wipe and all this stuff. And so we go back and forth through her Kree memories that are implanted to some degree and these human memories. And at no point did I actually get any of the emotion of her backstory. The origin story seems to some point glossed over because we as the audience are just as brainwashed as Carol is. And that first act, I never really caught up with them. I mean, Andy, is that where you felt the pace problems, or was it just throughout?
It was throughout, but I mean, that's a large part of it. I wanted to know who Carol was. I wanted to have this better sense of this character and really kind of get a read on her, and I never did. It was very frustrating for me because we sped through all of these flashbacks of her as a kid, and I mean, they were great bits of. And I caught a lot of, what they were trying to do, the messages that they were trying to get across as far as her as this kid and the familial issues that she was having with her father and brother or whatever they were. And, her desire to kind of, break free and, go faster and all those sorts of things, which was fine. But I never was emotionally connected to any of that. And to that end, I think that you look at something like the opening of Guardians of the Galaxy, and you have such a strong connection with that kid and his mother, so that
perfectly paced, and it's what?
I don't know.
4 minutes.
It's short, but we get to know
short.
just enough of that character to have this emotional connection with him that I never felt with Carol. And it didn't help that Brie Larson, the portrayal. It's a frustrating portrayal, and I a lot of people have complained about the way that Brie portrayed it because they say she feels wooden. It feels very, very stiff. And I 100% agree with that. But I also 100% say, you know what? That's kind of how these Kree are supposed to be. And so I get that she's trying to kind of play it like a Kree, but unfortunately it just doesn't come across very well. And it ended up making for a very frustrating character for me to connect with. And, I was reading something that the directors had said, and this was, I don't know which of the directors actually said this, but either Anna or Ryan, they said that when they were first looking at it and they were looking at Kelly Sue DeConnick's version of Captain Marvel, which is largely the version that they pulled from, which is, I think, one of the more recent ones, like 2012, I think, is when Kelly Sue started writing the character. And she said their version is what really made it click for her. They said Kelly Sue's Carol was brash, irreverent, emotional, funny, and most importantly to us as storytellers, she was complicated, messy. This was the Carol that deserved her own movie. And I'm like, I didn't see that Carol. Like, I got little hints of it, but nowhere was it this interesting of a character. And for me, that made it so frustrating. And I loved that moment at the end, but I'm like, where were the moments that built to that for me? So that's it. It never congealed. Right. And I don't know if it's just pacing or just the way that they constructed the script. I feel like they could have found ways to kind of imbue more of that emotional connection throughout it. So I really wanted to kind of continue along this ride with her. But I also have to acknowledge, like, I walked out of it with my wife and daughter, and they were like, oh my God, that was the best film. That was like my favorite Marvel movie. So wow. I acknowledge that there is a disconnect maybe for me. I don't know.
Steve, who did you see it with?
I saw it by myself. I'm taking my wife, my youngest daughter, and her friend tomorrow. And I think, part of it is, yes, we see all those scenes where it's like, and I don't say it's familial issues, Andy, like the whole thing about her driving too fast. It's this is what boys can do. This is what girls can't do. Because my wife in high school wanted to be an archaeologist, and her counselor was like, no, that's not a thing girls do. And that's what I saw throughout this. That's all I saw all throughout this was, in those flashbacks, she as a girl and as a woman being told, no, you can't do this. Why do you think it's called a cockpit? All of that stuff, I think, is part of that
because maybe I misinterpreted, and I think I read somebody else might have commented on this, that there was a flash in there that made it seem like there might be some like abuse from her father or something. So maybe I misread that.
See, I don't get that. I see it as just for me, the emotion, I think, is going to probably resonate more with the women in the audience because guys have not grown up being told you can't do these things. Even to the point where, we've got, they can't, they're in the Air Force, they can't be fighter pilots. This is these things that they're being continuously told they cannot do. And she is a character that does not like being told what she can't do. So and to me, that was.
I totally acknowledge what you're putting there, Steve. What I would have liked to have seen as an audience member is to experience that with Carol Danvers, as opposed to being told it in exposition later on. And I feel the same way about the things that you mentioned, Andy, which is that sort of irreverent and brash character. That in general, we didn't experience that as part of the story. We were told it anecdotally through other characters, where Jude Law later on talks about, I thought I liked you, but really you just annoyed me. Or and with the character with Minerva, is there a reason we never hung out? All the stuff that would have made us understand who Captain Marvel and Carol Danvers was as a person, as a character, was all kind of told to us in flashback, which, again, I get why they did that. That's the frame of the story we're put there. But I think the Guardians of the Galaxy example is such a great example of we go along for the ride with the character in that movie, and in this character we're in the dark with the character and are learning it as we go. And because of that, it felt like a thin exposition of what those things were, as opposed to us really getting to get emotionally invested in those things as well. One of the things I talked about, this being the linchpin of the Marvel, the wrapping up phase 3 here. One of the things that was really hard for me is that nothing about the MCU other than the Easter eggs was revealed to me in this movie. And I have this question that I wanted to pose to you guys, which is, what was revealed to you about the Marvel Cinematic Universe by putting this movie at this time, number 21 in the series? Why is it here? For me, the biggest part was that this wasn't that big of a turn. It felt like another origin story, but I don't really understand anything about Captain Marvel's powers or why she's going to be important in Endgame. I mean, she seems really strong, but why?
Because she basically absorbed the energy, I guess, not directly from, but secondhand through the power pack or whatever on the jet from the Tesseract. So basically she absorbed Tesseract energy, because the Tesseract is what powered the light speed jet. And when that she totally that's why she's amped up. It's Infinity Stone power that she is powered by.
Got it. Okay, and that is a huge change. So I didn't understand that, because but the Tesseract didn't show up until. It didn't technically show up until we get to Marvel's lab in space. But so we're saying that,
right?
Was it a piece of the Tesseract or something that they blew up when the plane crashed?
When she blew it up, it was like, oh, well, we've lost the power source. And it's like, no, that the power source is actually up on the lab. That was just the energy source was up there. They used that energy source to power the jet. So that's
a big thing. So going back to my question, then, if we look at it, then Captain Marvel has the same power in effect of one of the Infinity Stones.
Right.
That's a pretty big deal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why to me, this is, why at this point in time, that's why there's discussion about, the Tesseract and who has it. So how did it go from Nick Fury's desk to wherever it shows up next? So Captain America, First Avenger, Red Skull has it, and then it falls out the bottom of the jet into the ocean or whatever. Tony Stark's dad, retrieves it. So basically S.H.I.E.L.D. has it. And so the speculation is that, S.H.I.E.L.D. is collaborating with the Air Force or whatever, somehow involved in the creation of this, the Pegasus light speed engine.
Got it.
The Pegasus
that's
project.
Been mentioned before.
And then it ends up back on Nick Fury's desk at the end. And we know that S.H.I.E.L.D. still has it, because at the beginning of the Avengers, that's when they're tinkering around with this Tesseract, and that's what leads to all the events of the first Avengers film.
Who's tinkering around with it in the first one? I don't.
In
remember.
The first Avengers, that's Doctor. The doctor
Thor
from
Doctor,
the Thor movies.
He is tinkering around with the Tesseract.
Yeah, and then it opens up, and then Loki comes through the portal, takes the.
Yeah, I just don't know
because the whole thing is the battle for the Tesseract.
Yeah.
Well, because Shield had it, and they asked after the events of Thor.
Right.
They asked the Doctor to come and say, "Hey, we're trying to. This is a potential like infinite energy source. This could be great for the world," and they're having him work on it, and that's when Loki gets involved, and things go off the rails from there.
Pretty wild. So so I guess that's setting us up for an interesting thing then. I mean, my thing is that I just didn't understand. I didn't make that connection. So I felt like she just seemed really powerful, but we had no sense of what that is. And if the possibility now is there that any one person can absorb the power of any one Infinity Stone, that leaves a new potential conspiracy theory for the way that the heroes or people involved are going to overpower Thanos.
It will, yeah. Well, we've got that. We've got obviously the Ant-Man element where he's, dealing with the quantum verse. Kind of all of the stuff going on that infinitely small scale, which is supposed to play in. I think there are going to be a lot of elements brought in that are going to make it very interesting. And I think somebody actually, this is going off on a tangent here, but somebody threw out that there was an Easter egg, which I missed in the teaser that they released for it, or I guess it's the trailer, that hinted at the Iron Man version that Tony would make for Pepper, and she would be her own Iron Man character.
Yeah, how much credence do you give to that? I don't think that's where they're going with Gwyneth Paltrow.
They were suggesting that that it's possible if she does don whatever the mantle is of I'm trying to find the name of that character, that she might possibly be the one who puts that suit on and actually goes out and finds Tony when he's lost in space and bring him back. Wow. So that was the speculation that I had read. So yeah.
This movie's going to be like 12 hours long in April. This is a really interesting revelation for me. So thanks, Steve. I didn't get it at all, and I was really confused. I mean, I didn't put those two and two together that she was basically an Infinity Stone. So that's pretty amazing.
And with that, I mean, they have said time and time again that she is the most powerful of their superheroes. So I think with that, and then knowing that she basically is kind of this Infinity Stone character, I think it's going to give a lot of interesting stuff for them to play around with as we jump into that film. So
yeah, she is what we all had thought Vision was going to be in the first one, but he was so easily dispatched. So that's interesting. So that makes it a little bit, I guess, more powerful for me. But Micah, I mentioned this, Andy, to you in the pre-show. My feeling about this movie, and kind of the reason why I was so deflated in what we watched with it, is that it felt like it was the Marvel Cinematic Universe's version of Solo without the historically loved character. In that the most fun things to me about this movie were the Easter eggs, as opposed to the story that was here. So that piece about the Tesseract and us going on that long sort of hitchhike to figure out where it was, again, that's another piece of the thing that I would have needed to be able to put that together for me to find that much enjoyment in what was going on in that movie.
Well, and I think that's a tricky comparison, only because I think Solo has just so many flaws, and as I mentioned in our pre-show conversation, the largest of which is it kind of feels a little boring. On rewatch, it's just not very gripping. It's kind of forgettable. I don't feel that about this film. I think this film has so much going for it. And I think for me, it just ends up being so frustrating because I feel like I said, I mean, there's just so much good that they're building with this film that unfortunately, I just don't think it was in the right hands to deliver it. And it kills me because I just don't think that Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck were the right directors. And I don't think they had the right composer because I think the music doesn't deliver any of the emotion that I wanted to kind of feel from this film. And it's just, it was just frustrating, but I don't think that it fell to that level for me that Solo did.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up about the directors, because we talked about it a little bit in the introduction. Do you know why they would have that sort of dual.
Well, it's a directing
director role?
pair.
And how would they make
These
that
guys have
work?
been a directing pair forever. I mean, they for all the way back to film school, really, and they dated. I don't know if they've ever gotten married, but they've been together for a very long time as a pair, starting as writers. Doing, I think they wrote Half Nelson was their first film that they wrote, and Ryan directed that one, not a co-directed thing. And then they did Sugar together, and then It's Kind of a Funny Story and Mississippi Grind with Ben Mendelsohn, and which was a trailer pick.
Okay.
So you guys can certainly throw that into the mix for Trailer Rewind one of these days.
Oh yeah, Ryan Reynolds.
And then finally this, and it's an odd set of films for them for the team at Marvel to look at and go, yes, these guys are the ones that we should bring on. And they were considered actually back all the way to Guardians of the Galaxy. This was one of the pairs that they originally considered for that as well.
Well, now it looks like, do they have a new director for Guardians of the Galaxy 3 now?
I don't know what's going on.
This is essentially, while the Guardians movies are not made, this is essentially a piece of the Guardians puzzle.
It is. I'm just, they still don't have a director attached to that. Interesting.
Have you ever worked with a director pair like that, Andy?
No. Although weirdly, this is a weird thing. I almost worked on Sugar with this pair.
Oh, really?
How weird is that? Yeah,
Awesome.
They filmed a good chunk of it here in the Phoenix area.
They didn't ask you to do Half Nelson. That's silly, stupid, but yeah, I just don't know how it would work, and so that's interesting. And I know that I've heard of directing pairs in the past, but I was wondering if there was something specific about this. But that background is very helpful on it, and it sounds like all those movies you mentioned, there's nothing like this. This is
and it's
from a comic book standpoint or even action, I guess.
Yeah, right. But it's one of those things that we've talked about this countless times on the show. Even Iron Man right now with Jon Favreau and the fact that they brought him on. But we talked about that when we talked about Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom and bringing that director on.
Sure.
And it's very much a thing that a lot of studios are doing now, is bringing on kind of these indie directors to direct these tentpole films because they want to kind of have that vision of some new blood, but they also want to be able to kind of control it. And nobody likes those David Fincher Alien 3 types of situations. They want people that they can control, but who have quote visions. Right. So
this definitely felt like it was checking off the boxes for Marvel. So, I don't know whether or not you mentioned whether or not they were right for the job or not. It was tough for me to tell because it just felt like another Marvel movie to me.
I feel like this was the poorest pacing of any Marvel film that I've seen. I just felt like, I don't know if pacing is the right word, but just the way this story was constructed, I feel like even some of their sloppier films have had just a better flow of the story, and I've felt more connection with the characters like this one. And I don't know, I know I said that my wife and my daughter loved it, but for a huge bulk of the film, like there was no laughter in the theater, and it was a full house that I saw it in, and it was just kind of largely quiet. And sometimes there were some jokes and stuff, and I'm like, I feel like people should laugh, but nobody was, and I don't know, it was weird.
There was no laughter in my theater either. Steve, was there a
really?
laugh line that?
Oh yeah. Well, first off, there was the whole Marvel Stan Lee opening thing that got cheers
amazing.
And applause.
That was fantastic. Oh, you got applause? That's great. I like hearing that.
No, we had applause for that. Yeah. No, there were laughs. There's the yes, let's laugh at outdated technology. Put the CD in. What's going on? It's loading. There's those got laughs in my theater. Those little lines. There were, yes. It wasn't huge laughs, but yes, there were laughs. I agree. There were moments where I thought this should be a bigger laugh, or this is funny to me and I'm chuckling, but other people aren't. And so yes, Andy, I agree. There are some pieces that felt a little flat, that I would have expected more. And I will agree with you that for me, things work together, but yes, it doesn't. You don't have the the big swells of emotion that you'll get out of things. I didn't feel as emotionally manipulated as I do by some other films. But on the other hand, yes, it did feel a little flat in some areas where this should be a big moment and it's not quite feeling that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. They had 5 people listed on the script, which I thought was interesting. And I went down the list of the other people on it. One is a former writer, or I shouldn't say former, but a contributor to the writing on Guardians of the Galaxy, which is interesting because it's pulled there. Another one who's on the list, the name for the first one, that the person that I was talking about is Nicole Perlman. She wrote Guardians, was one of the writers of Guardians of the Galaxy. And then I see the name.
I think she's behind Detective Pikachu too.
Oh, well, I like that. And then the name Geneva Robertson Dworet. She is listed with a whole bunch of scripts announced, and one of them listed on there is Silver Sable, which is a female character from the Marvel comics
Spider-Man
universe.
Side of things, though. I think that's coming over from Sony.
Spider-Man side of things, yes, and has a connection also to S.H.I.E.L.D. So that's interesting, too, when you consider that Spider-Man Far From Home is going to introduce him to S.H.I.E.L.D. It's interesting to see that maybe there's those things happening, at least that it's announced. You wonder if she's going to be one of the Fox properties or if she's going to be one of the Silver Sable character, now that I'm talking about one of the Fox properties or one of the Disney properties as they kind of meld together going forward. So you have these 5 collaborators on the script, 2 of them including Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck. So all that stuff is interesting. I think, I don't know if pacing is the right word either, Andy. I think the first act was really tough for me pacing wise. And again, it just felt because of the frame they were telling us the story through. I felt as confused about who Carol Danvers was as she did, and that may be by design, but I think that's a poor choice if that's the way that they would chose to tell the story.
Yeah, I mean, I love those like cool flashbacks, like when she's in the mind frack device that the scrolls have her in. Yeah. And they're flashing through her mind, and that was brilliant when they're like almost like rewinding and fast forwarding her memories. That was so much fun to watch. I had a blast the way that was playing. Unfortunately, I never got any of those whole. Like I never got to see them, and I think that would have really helped. And so it's unfortunate. Which
is again the experience of the character, right? I mean, honestly, that's if you're writing the story, I guess that's the insight that the writers are trying to convey there, but it just made it really hard to understand for me. You mentioned that Brie Larson seemed a little wooden at places, so maybe it was hard for her to understand too.
It's possible. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
I thought she was great. I like her there. I'm glad that they selected her. I see that there was a ton of people that were potentially on board to play this character. I'm really happy with her in the role. I think she's going to be able to do good things. But I felt she was wooden too, and maybe that was the Kree influence. I felt like there was a lot of power posing going on, that they had her set a lot as they entered shots and as they left them. The one that I think of is just before that great line that you mentioned, Steve, when she and Jude Law, the Jan Rog character, are having their standoff, that they're constantly posed. And I felt that way in this movie. I haven't really felt that way about Marvel movies in the past as much. It's something that I definitely catch from DC a lot. And that usually means a negative thing for me. But I hope that they, moving forward with this character, that they open her up a little bit more and allow her to be more human as she progresses forward.
I love Brie Larson. I think that she's an incredible actress, and I hate the elements of society that bag on her because she is outspoken. I just think that's nonsense, and I think there are these people and these elements that are just dark and unnecessary, and it's just ridiculous. I think that she's doing so much good for society and pushing things to be better, and I think that's fantastic. I think I can't fault her for her performance. I felt like it was a little stiff, a little wooden. And after reading that quote from the directors about this is why we love Carol Danvers, I'm like, well, I wish that I saw that, because it sounds like a fantastic version. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff here. I think her relationships with the other characters, is what helps the most, because like as she relates to them, I think that there's that connection. And I think for me, the strongest one possibly was her friend's daughter. Like I just liked that there seemed to be a little bit more of a connection there. I thought that was a pretty touching relationship.
Right. And if we're apologizing for the film, again, this concept of the Kree nature or her Kree brainwashing has made her more wooden, then we can say that those relationships and those sort of reflections of who she was as a human is what's kind of bringing Carol back to us in that. I just wanted more of it. I think that they could have done more of that dynamic, irreverent personality. I would have liked to have seen
I have to ask you guys a question, because now you brought up the brainwashing, and I never felt like she was brainwashed. And I guess this is a question I have, because I felt like, my sense of what happened in the past is that, the whole spaceship, they crash it after getting attacked. Annette Bening's character dies, and then Jan Rog comes over the horizon, and Carol shoots the ship, blows up, absorbs the energy, and by doing that loses her memory. Meanwhile, the Kree take her in and kind of turn her into one of them. As he says, he pumped his blood into her, turned her into basically a Kree, and trained her and everything, and so that they can keep tabs on her. Is that right? What was the reason that they're doing all this? Because they know that she has this power?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, but I do feel that she was brainwashed. I mean, because they were using her as a weapon. You get that kind of from Ronan, the accuser, when he finally understands what she has power-wise at the end, right?
Well, if you go back to the very beginning, when we have, we start off, our opening shot is this, during the crash, and what we see is, we see Veers on the ground. She's got green blood coming from her nose. She looks up and she sees
a Skrull
come and shoot, Annette Bening. Which when we get to later in her memory, that's not how things played out at all. So I don't think there's anything that explicitly says brainwashing, and there's always the trick of memory of if that's what she was told had happened, that's what her memory would be. But that's what I found interesting, is we get that version at the beginning, and then when we get later on her actual recollection of what goes down there with the ship, that I was like, oh, this is not how it happened. We had her memory. Now, I don't know if it's brainwashing, but I could say that for somebody that's due to trauma, has lost their memory, and then is raised up in this Kree culture, that they're going to be defining what her reality is. And whether that's enculturation or brainwashing, there's lots of terms for that, but clearly, yes, she was living in a certain reality that she'd been told the way things were. To the extent to how much of that was politics, because they realized how powerful she was, and that's why they kept trying to have her control her emotions, so that they could then, they know she's a weapon that if unleashed is a threat to them. So it makes sense that it's in their best interest to train her to be a warrior, but one that restrains her emotions so that she doesn't realize the full extent of her powers.
Yeah.
But I don't know ultimately what their end game is with that, of you've got this great weapon. When are you going to, is it that she needs to prove that she's going to be the compliant soldier? Because clearly, Carol Danvers is not, as we see, from her childhood memories, she's not somebody that's going to take orders or be told that she can't do something. And we even see that, during the sort of the raid to get, to go and get the spy that's been captured. She's like, we got to go across. No, that's not. He realizes, no, she's going to do what she wants to do. And I guess that's the balance that the Kree have to manage of, we've got this weapon, we can control her to a certain extent, but we have to be cautious, because if she realizes her power, she's going to become.
So they're just doing it to keep her under wraps, so they can kind of control the weapon and not let it fall into somebody else's hands.
Yeah, that's what I would say. And for me, it's that, restoring memory, that, relearning who she is, to me, that, I wouldn't say it's brainwashing from the Kree, but living day by day, not knowing who you are. To me, I can see that. I don't know that I'd call it wooden. I thought the scenes she had with Sam Jackson were great. I love the relationship between those two. I had a lot of fun with, sort of the younger, softer Fury. And I just really enjoyed the scenes, whether it's, at the bar, their conversation about, sharing memories, everything. I love the chemistry between those two. It really worked.
They had
for
great
me.
chemistry. I agree on that count. And actually I'd throw Clark Gregg into the mix there, because it was just, I thought when he was paired up with Nick Fury also, they had some great scenes together.
That was great. And that we go back to that sort of the wooden, if we're making apologies for the film, if the woodenness was a choice, the chemistry that the character that Brie Larson exhibited in her character with everyone else, I think was really great. And I'd even say the same thing about Lashana Lynch when they come and they meet her best friend and her best friend's daughter. These are all things that Brie Larson as an actress really demonstrated the chemistry appropriately. So again, if it was a choice, if we say it, that would be a positive to this film, that we see how important this woman is and how great all these actors' relationships come off. I agree with the point about Coulson. I thought he was great, and I think he's been particularly great in every Marvel movie that he's been in. But he was super important. He was the person that allowed things to happen in this movie. I think it was wonderful.
I was disappointed, I will say, in Lashana Lynch. I mean, I thought she was fine. I thought she was fine as an actress. I was just disappointed in what they gave us for her. I felt
fair.
like she was great as Rambeau, who actually will at some point, or at least in the comics, I believe she does at some point take up the Captain Marvel mantle, which I think is pretty interesting. But she, again, I think this is just my complaint about the way that the flashbacks were dealt with, and the fact that I felt like there was this great relationship there, and I never got to see it except in these little hints that never gave me enough.
I wanted so much more of that. I mean, that's the thing. They have this cooperative advertisements with the Air Force and the female pilots of the Air Force talking about this sort of great tradition that we have. And it felt like it was so anecdotal in the movie. And those little snips, like, give us 5 minutes of it or something. I wanted more of that too. I think it could have been served much better.
Yeah, it really could have.
Ben Mendelsohn, I thought was great. I liked him as the Krull. I thought he did a great job. You don't really see him, but you get his character through all the makeup.
Yeah, I'm used to seeing him as like the villains, like in Ready Player One and Rogue One. So it was nice to see the humorous side of him in this one. It was like the lighter bit. His humor was I really enjoyed that.
The humor that worked the most for me. I didn't really laugh at many other people, but when he was being funny, in tense situations most of the time, I was happy. I thought that was actually clever.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But I don't think that he could top the humor from the Flurkin. I think that is what got the most laughs.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, my kids were just loving. And I mean, we've been calling our cats Flurkins ever since. So it was a delight, but yeah, but Ben was great. And then, a weird story point that I have, which, I guess it might be neither here nor there, but did he kill Nick Fury's original boss and then take up his mantle disguised as him?
He said he tied him up.
He did say that?
He said he tied him up.
I guess I missed that.
Yeah. Because they don't have to kill them to take on their
but
legacy.
I was just like, but then where was it?
Yeah.
Because we never see that guy again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, did he take him out?
Yeah.
Like, I guess that was just a random little note. Okay.
So no, potentially no, because they did give us that line. Yeah. But you're right. We never see him again. So we just have to trust that that's what happened.
Right.
For Jude Law, how come Jan Rog and Marvell are not blue?
I heard something about this as far as the Kree and how there are like different races of Kree, just like there are different races of human. And that and it has to do with if they are exposed to certain chemicals in the atmosphere or something like that. I can't exactly remember, but yeah, there's They have pink-skinned ones. They have the blue-skinned ones, and then there's obviously Korath, who is I don't know if I'd call him an African American. I don't know what I call him in the Kree variant, but and then he's there too. So.
He's darker skinned, but he's Kree as well.
It says, okay, this is a random note from Marvel, the Wikia. Let's see. The interbreeding with various other races led to the creation of a secondary race of Kree with pink skin. The pink Kree would eventually come to outnumber the blue Kree.
Really?
So, yeah.
I thought Jude Law was pretty much, he was fine. He didn't seem like much of a character to me. It was pretty straightforward the whole way through. I thought Annette Bening had some interesting shifts in playing, sort of this imposter of the Supreme Intelligence and stuff. I didn't like her early on when she was trying to be sympathetic to the Carol Danvers character. But when she became sort of the bad guy, even though it wasn't actually the Marvel character, it was the Supreme Intelligence masquerading as Marvel. That was some of the best stuff I liked of hers, when she was more extreme and less subtle.
Well, and that was paired with a really interesting scene when Danvers is I don't know what you'd say, tied up by the AI, by the AI system.
Yes,
and everything that she was going through internally in that was really cool, with kind of the way that she'd fall up on the wall, and it was like a liquid thing that she was falling into, and visually really interesting stuff going on there.
Lee Pace shows up again as Ronan. I that was the big kind of. I took both my kids to it too. That was the big connection that they had to the original movies of the universes. They were saying, "Oh wait, is this where Ronan becomes bad?" And it was interesting for them to ask that early on, when there was the difference between Ronan and Yanrog, and then for them to have the realization. My kids are 7 and 9. To have the realization that, oh wait, all the Kree are bad, was a really interesting thing. Yeah. And then to have the setup with Ronan there. I felt like he was even less of a character in this movie than we got from him in the Guardians movies.
And this is possibly my biggest complaint in this whole movie, because what did they do to Lee Pace? Oh my God. Like, I was watching this and I'm like, oh, it's too bad that they couldn't get Lee Pace to come back to play his role. He didn't sound like Lee. He didn't look like Lee. Like, the makeup was bad. Right. And I'm like, oh, that's not him. And every time he'd come back on screen, I'm like, gosh, he's just not quite getting it right. This actor is close, but not quite there. And I was, and then at the end it said Lee Pace. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. They brought Lee back and they made him look like some pseudo Lee who's not Lee. Oh, it was like the worst thing I'd ever seen. I've never seen them bring an actor back to play a role and make them not look like themselves or sound like themselves. Oh, I don't know what happened with that.
Well, are you talking about the lack of the black?
No, it's just,
on him?
But like his blue, just the blue, it didn't look like the same quality of blue. It didn't seem to have kind of that shimmeriness that he had last time. But also, he just, like, his face didn't look the same. And I'm like, maybe.
Well, he's 20 years younger. I don't know if they tried to de-age him on that.
No, I thought he looked, I was like, maybe he's older and more bloated and has been drinking a lot. I don't know, because he...
Yeah.
Oh, wait, this is the Orlando Bloom showing back up as Legolas in the Hobbit movies.
I bought that.
Dad bod Legolas coming back.
I bought that a lot more. I could tell that was Orlando Bloom.
Wow. Oh,
this did not look like Lee Pace at all. I was so surprised when his name came up in the credits. I was like, oh my God, what? Oh, so disappointed.
Yeah. I thought he was pretty thin and there wasn't really much for him to do there at all. One other note that I wanted to say from the cast was that McKenna Grace, and I want to bring her up because we just were talking about I, Tonya recently, and McKenna Grace.
But we didn't talk about her in I, Tonya.
Right, McKenna Grace played.
but I saw her.
older, young Tanya Harding in I, Tanya. And she played the 13-year-old Carol here, the one that is sort of on her go-kart and crashes and then gets up injured and but proud. I think she's kind of great. She's got these big roles now of these big movies. It's going to be interesting to see her grow up and see what she does next.
I wonder if she kind of got into this through working on that film Gifted.
I don't know it. What is she doing? Gifted?
Well, she acted with what's his name? Who was in Gifted? Why am I blanking on that already? It was Chris Evans.
Oh, cool.
She played his niece that he's raising after his sister died, and he's in that custody battle with his mom, and it looked pretty interesting. But it came out 2017 also, and so I wonder if that's just one of those things where he might have mentioned to the people at Marvel, Liz McKenna, she's pretty good. Might want to throw her in there.
She can do this.
Yeah,
and I see a note here about Kelly Sue DeConnick as well.
Was
she in the
She
movie?
is. Kelly Sue popped in somewhere in the train scene. I think one of the train stations when she's
okay.
Okay.
The LA rail line scene.
Yeah, she's somewhere in there, and I missed her, but I read online people were very excited that they're like, "Oh, Kelly Sue was in there. Did you see her?" And I'm like, "Oh, I totally missed that she was there." So
interesting. Very cool.
Oh, speaking of cast, though, before we jump out of this, sorry to interrupt. We didn't write down in our notes Stan Lee. We, I think, need to throw him in here and his cameo.
Yes. Is this the last one?
No, I don't believe so.
No.
I
think there's one in Endgame. Yeah, but I read an article about this Stan Lee cameo because it poses interesting questions. Because
in like barefoot McCartney questions? Or?
No.
I know where you're going with this.
No. So if you know where I'm going with this. So Stan Lee is on the bus or train or whatever, and he's reading the script for Mallrats, and he's practicing his line. So in Mallrats, Stan Lee is playing Stan Lee, and that Stan Lee is famous for writing comic books. So if we're in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the Stan Lee in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is famous for writing the comic books for Spider-Man and Incredible Hulk, and those people live in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, what is going on?
It's all folding in on itself.
It is. But I loved that, just to see that, to me, it put to rest the whole theory that Stan Lee is this watcher, because he's all over. I'm like, no, it's just Stan Lee is Stan Lee, and apparently maybe he's just God in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Conspiracy theory, Steve, was it online somewhere?
Yeah, it's online. I can find the article and
take it back and then link our recording from last month's The Film Board about Happy Death Day to You in multiple dimensions, and let them do that, because that would be an interesting way to hash that out.
I think Kevin Smith actually even said something about it when he tweeted after he watched it. Yeah. He had a nice tweet about the film where he's like totally in tears, but he said, because he says, but I mean, his thing was, but if I'm now part of the Marvel universe, I only have one question: did I survive the snap?
Right? Yes.
Yes. And of course he would care about that. But
I think that led people down this road of, wait a minute, if he's part of the universe, and then it kind of spiraled into this whole thing of all that. So
as far as camera on this movie, there wasn't a whole lot of particularly special camera stuff for me to really latch onto. The cinematographer on it was Ben Davis, which one of you wonderful folks wrote down. Also shot Guardians of the Galaxy and the Ultron Avengers 2 movie and Doctor Strange, which is interesting because those movies I think are all really bold in terms of camera. Maybe not Ultron so much, but the other two for sure. I really like what the kind of things they're doing creatively with the camera are in that movie. In this movie, I feel like the only really creative stuff is through effects.
I think that there's, I don't know, actually, now that I'm about to say this, I don't know if it's necessarily a note that I would credit specifically to him or to him paired with the directors, but I think there was some nice framing that we did, that there was kind of this interesting consistency with some shots where we'd have like the character, typically it was Carol, centered in the screen, turning and like facing directly into the camera, whether it was her as the little girl or as the older character. It was throughout, and it was kind of this consistent thing that was kind of almost a representation of kind of her taking this moment to find the strength within herself. And that was a moment that I really
That's
liked.
great.
And I actually noticed it mainly because in one of the early trailers, like they cut all those shots like back to back to back. And so you kept seeing it very consistently. And so I knew it was kind of a thing, but it was something that I really liked, how they did that, because I thought it was a great representation for her character.
We talked a little bit about music earlier. It's a neat idea with I shouldn't say neat, that actually makes it sound diminished. I think it's a great idea to put in a bunch of period piece music, all by female artists in the film. Some of the music cues were great. Most notably, I think Just a Girl during the big fight scene between Captain Marvel and all the Kree. In my theater, it was way too quiet. I mean, it's almost as if the balance of the music to the effects was off, that I was hearing too much effects and not enough music. And Guardians of the Galaxy, like they slam those music cues at you. When you hear what is it, Brandy at the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, it takes over your entire experience of that movie. And these music cues needed that kind of respect as well, and they didn't have it. Some of them were just terribly misplaced, though. Waterfalls. To put in waterfalls when they're driving from the city to the secret location where everything, I mean, it literally felt like they were reaching a little bit to just drop in some of the greatest songs from the 90s. And while some of them were so wonderful, that really took me out of the film sometimes, that I just like, oh yeah, I get what you're trying to do here. So in general, I was like, great idea, just poorly executed.
It's always one of those things where it feels like Guardians, it's felt so much in those films like the director clearly had passion for the soundtrack that he was putting together for it, and it happened to work really well in context of the film. In this one, I think I think I'd largely agree with you. I think 90% of the time, I think the music choices that they picked worked really well, but I think there were a few choices in there I'm like, that one didn't quite work for me. But I will counter your point about the sound quality, though. I saw this in Dolby Atmos, and I had zero problem with the presentation of the songs, particularly that one. I mean,
that makes me so much happier, because I mean, I was literally, even in that fight scene where it was so great, I just wanted so much more of it. So maybe it was my theater, maybe it was the style that it was in. For you to see it in the top real sound quality available and hear that it was great, I really like hearing that.
Yeah, no, I saw it in Atmos as well. I didn't really have any issues with sound, but related to music, because Carol is wearing a Nine Inch Nails shirt for such a good part of the movie. Actually, you can go to the Nine Inch Nails store. You can buy that T-shirt, or they also have a special one that has the Nine Inch Nails logo with the Captain Marvel sort of like star symbol behind it. If you want your Captain Marvel Nine Inch Nails T-shirt, those are available over at the Nine Inch Nails store right now. They're which if in 1995 you had asked me, would Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails be part of Disney, I would have said, what? No, never. But, hey, any way to make a buck, right? I'm imagining the Nine Inch Nails shirts that she wears in the movie. I imagine you're going to see a lot of 40-somethings wearing them.
That's a great shirt too.
She had all of her 90s T-shirts were bands, weren't they? She had a Heart T-shirt on at one point and a Guns N' Roses T-shirt on at one point too.
Yes.
So that's interesting. There was really kind of hard-hitting music aspects of trying to make it a period piece. Another aspect of the music is that this was the first female composer in the MCU. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. It was Pinar Toprak, who I can't remember where she's from. Somewhere. Oh, I don't have it in front of me, but she largely, I think, is most known for she's from Turkey. She's a Turkish composer. But what she's really kind of burst on the scene with is as far as composing goes, that she did Fortnite, and that kind of exploded into something for her. So that's
wait. Have you guys played Fortnite?
I have not.
haven't. I'm not a first person shooter kind of guy.
A couple times.
You have.
Yeah.
Is the music
a couple
is the
times?
music like a note?
I don't. I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't paying attention to the music. I was just avoiding being shot. I wasn't. I played a couple times.
But she did Krypton, the music for the TV series also. So I mean, she's dabbled in kind of the superhero sides of things as well. So.
Oh, and also Justice League.
She did some additional music on that. She was
additional music. Yet. Okay, right. Okay.
She's from the Hans Zimmer school of all of those.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's something I very much applaud these filmmakers for really pushing to bring on so many women in some of these creative roles. I think that's a fantastic thing to push for, and I think they've created some great stuff, whether it's the costume design. I think that Sanja Milkovic Hayes did some great stuff with the costumes, whether it's the alien races or the 90s costumes, whatever it is. Just just all of these teams that they kind of built just created a really whole world. But I just to going back to the music though, with Pinar and her score, it unfortunately does kind of, like I said earlier, it fits into the MCU where it is kind of this, it works, but in so many ways it ends up being kind of forgettable, and it's kind of frustrating.
Right. It ends up being a variation on a theme.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if that's all we have to say about this deal, I think it's about time that we rank it. Yes. Do you guys have any ending comments that you want to throw out there?
Just a last note, Captain Marvel, Steve and I talked about a little bit on the Saturday Matinee, our Patreon show, just kind of the numbers in the box office of the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Captain Marvel, just after one day, set the record for the biggest 2019 weekend. And I know it's only, 2+ months into the year so far, but just one day, it already had made almost 61.4 million. And was already in 6th place just after that for the 2019 domestic chart. And they are estimating that it's going to be projecting or coming in between 145 to 155 or more million on its opening weekend, which looks to push it up to toward the top of the of kind of the, I can't remember what they were saying, but they're estimating it could be right up toward the top of the films, the MCU releases. So
my theater was showing it in 2D on every half hour over the course of its opened, as the theater was open. I don't know how they were managing that with the different theaters, and then also having a 3D show too. And they were all pretty much filled. They weren't sold out, but they were down to singles. So it's definitely it's definitely pulling them in.
I very much look forward to seeing how this one's going to do at the box office. I'm curious if it's going to crack into the top 5 with because Steve and I were talking about this morning. So many of the films in the top 5 as far as adjusted gross are the Avengers films, the kind of the group films, because everybody who might love a particular hero is likely going to see that just so they can see their hero, but they might skip some of the other ones. And so, but Black Panther was the anomaly that kind of crept into that top 5. So I wonder if Captain Marvel will do the same.
Well, I imagine next month we'll be talking about whether or not Endgame is going to beat the numbers of Captain Marvel. And based on the trends that we, talked about, because it is everybody, I'm imagining that Endgame's going to break any of those records on its opening weekend.
I wouldn't be surprised.
All right, let's head on over to Flickchart. We've got all the movies that we've talked about on this show ranked over at flickchart.com/TNR Filmboard. Flickchart is a really cool site where you can create a tournament-style stack ranking of your movie preferences. So check it out and find out how your film favorites fare against ours. Andy, where do we start for Flickchart today?
Starting off with Captain Marvel or Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets.
Oh, jeez. Captain Marvel.
I am going to say Captain Marvel.
I am going to say Valerian. Weirdly, I never would have
Yes,
in
weirdly.
a million years
It
guessed
was
I
a
would have
coin.
said that.
It was a
Wow.
coin flip for me.
Yeah.
But I'm going with Captain
That's
Marvel.
totally fine. Captain Marvel or Fury?
Fury.
I will say Captain Marvel here. I don't know why. Fury just.
Fury.
need to
Maybe
watch
I need
it.
to watch it
movie.
again, but the farther away I get from it, the less interested I am in it.
It
Yeah.
gets worse and worse.
Really? No, that's one that I just, I keep thinking I need to see that again because I remember having a really good time. So I'm going to go with Fury on that one because we had such a great time discussing that. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm right there with you. Yeah.
Captain Marvel or Looper? I'm going to say Looper.
Looper.
Okay.
What would you have? Well, yeah.
Well,
what would
how do you
pick?
feel?
I
Steve? I know your vote doesn't count.
No,
now,
it's
but
and
how do
the
you
thing
feel?
is, I really want to love Looper because I love Ryan Johnson, but there was something about that one that I don't know if I just heard so much hype about it that I just was like, yeah, it's good, but I don't love it. So yeah, I would pick Captain Marvel because for some reason I just have this like, yeah, it was okay. I had issues, or maybe I was not 100% focused because I didn't see it in the theater. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, it does have a flirkin.
Next.
So.
Yeah. There we go.
All right, Captain Marvel or First Man? I have to abstain from this one.
Oh, Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel.
Pete will hate you guys for that, I'm sure.
No.
I know,
Yeah,
but
well.
We have a
Yeah.
battle of
He's
Marvel
got- yeah.
captains. Captain Marvel or Captain America the Winter Soldier?
Winter Soldier.
Yeah, Winter Soldier for me.
Oh, even with the exposition bunker. Yeah, but I know you guys had issues with the first act.
These are coming up against all the ones that you hate.
Right. No,
Steve.
I don't
It's
hate it.
really easy for you to choose.
No.
Steve.
I agreed. Like I said, there's some moments of Captain Marvel that are a little flat. I didn't have as many issues with the first act as you two did with Captain Marvel, but this is one that, I'm happy either way
All right, well,
on that one. So yeah, doesn't matter.
Well, Winter Soldier it is. And Flickchart's doing that weird little thing where it's not, there's one more between Winter Soldier and Captain Marvel, and it's not letting us pick it because
That's
it
weird.
does that depending on how many numbers you have in the
okay.
ranking, where it can't.
Sure.
Oh, because it would go up against Age of Ultron.
Right, Age of Ultron is where
yeah.
but it's skipping that
Yeah.
one. It's not letting me do that one. So,
Oh, okay.
but that lands it at number 35 on our chart out of 79 films. So
Okay.
it's
just a little bit above
Above it,
average.
yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I will tell you, I did that on my personal flick chart, and it was pretty low. It ended up being the lowest of the Marvel movies for me, which I thought was
Wow.
really surprising. That we've done 9 of them, so that I found really interesting. As far as your rating and your like it, for me it was a 2 stars and a not like.
Oh,
wow.
wow. Yeah.
I was very much let down by this movie.
Even now that you know she's Tesseract powered, does that help?
Yes,
Okay.
but it didn't change my stars.
Okay.
I'll say that.
Oh, okay. Because I'm going to go with 4 stars and a like.
Cool.
I'm real torn on this one. I feel like I feel like our conversation, I've actually grown a little bit in appreciation for it, but not
Cool.
a ton. I was originally at 2.5 with a like though,
So you're
but now I'm at a 3 and a like. So
So you just, you go right there in the middle.
yeah,
Cool.
Perfect.
It's
So
a
that's a
3.
3. That's an
a
easy
three,
math.
Yeah.
3 with a like
That's great.
average that we ended up with here.
Nice. Where do we go from here? We're going next month to the Endgame. Avengers Endgame, which is really exciting. 22 movies. The culmination of a lot of things. I was hoping that this movie was going to tell me more about what was going to happen in Endgame, and it did not. So, so I have the still bated suspense, enjoyment, excitement that I had before I watched Captain Marvel this morning.
We only get a tiny hint of that, and that's in the mid credits scene.
She shows
Yeah.
up. She shows up. What does that mean? That told us nothing. We
What?
knew she was going to show up.
It was.
I mean,
it
come
worked
on.
for me.
It worked
Our
for me.
audience,
Yeah.
our
4
audience
films ago, she was
flipped
paged.
out with that. I was.
Oh,
it
yeah.
was
Really?
huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. On to the main show. You guys finished with Rocky now, right? What's next?
Creed 2 is coming out later this week.
Okay.
And that will be
Cool.
the end of it.
And then what's the series after that?
The next series is going to be the A Star Is Born series. We're going to be looking at all four of the films that are under that moniker.
I think I might try to watch some of those with you guys, and especially the new one, because I still haven't seen the new one, and it's a movie that's right up my alley.
So
I just
good.
haven't been, to be honest, emotionally prepared, because I know it's going to hit me really hard, and it's, from what everybody says, it's a real tearjerker. It's a real intensely dramatic film. So.
Yeah, it's a beautiful one.
And I need to test you, Andy, because we do this now. Where are we right now in the Marvel Movie Minute?
Marvel Movie Minute, we are, let's see, this is coming out on Tuesday, so we will have episode 47 for minute 47 will be coming out today. Later this afternoon.
You're not quite halfway done with Iron Man yet?
Not quite.
Right?
Not quite.
No.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's such an awesome monumental task.
Yeah, we're right in the middle of the press
marvel.
conference is where we are.
I am Iron Man.
Not that press
I
conference.
marvel. Oh, that's the last.
This is
one.
the one where he just got back. Yeah.
I marvel at your aspiration that you're doing with this, and I think it's fantastic, and I'm excited to be part of more going forward. Also, I forgot to talk about it in the show open, but all you wonderful people in the world should come join us over on our Discord server at thenextreel.com. Let us know you want to hang out there, and it's where we gather with our fun film family and discuss lots of remarkable things from throughout the entertainment universe. There's also specific chats about all of our shows, so come and join our gang and interact with us on the internet, because we like the attention. That's where we'll keep these conversations going. But for this one, say goodnight, Andy Nelson.
Good night, Andy Nelson.
And one more word from Steve Sarmento.
Hondo.
That's the one. At the next reel, when the movie ends, our conversation begins. Till next.